Shock Monkey Radio is created by adults for entertainment purposes. The views and opinions expressed here do not reflect the sponsors or FXPG Public Radio. For additional information, refer to the U.S. Bill of Rights. Stand warned. All right, so, yeah, man, whatever. Yeah, man, whatever. Oh, EK, just let it run. Hey, yo, turn up my headphones a little bit. Hey, yo, this podcast is for anyone. Fuck it. Just shut up and listen. So 20 years ago was the year 2000. And in the year 2000, I was still in the Navy. And when you walk down the barracks of U.S., was basically an NCO barracks, a bunch of, Petty Officer Thompson's talking to Petty Officer Hutchinson and so forth and so on. And you hang with these guys, you go into their rooms, you talk to them and stuff like that. And there's a guy who was playing a CD, and one of the lyrics of the song really caught me, and I was like, wait a second, who is this? And he says, this is Eminem. And it's like, well, what album is this? And he goes, this is the Marshall Mathers album. And I was like, I can't remember if it was an EP or an LP, but it was the Marshall Mathers EP, I think. And I didn't have it on vinyl, so I don't know what the speed of the record was. But I think it was the Marshall Mathers EP. And so I said, hey, man, let me borrow that. Let me borrow that CD, because I really want to listen to it, because he said something in one of his songs that made my ears perk up. I was like, oh, I guess I got to check this out. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about Eminem. Not the candy, the rapper. So I want to talk to you about year 2000 and how 20 years ago Eminem had been kind of spotted some of our social ills coming down the pipe. Is it pike or pipe? I don't know. So I want to talk a little bit about some songs, specifically the Marshall Mathers EP. And so, yeah, Eminem off the Marshall Mathers EP, excuse me. There's a song called Who Knew? All right, and there's some lyrics here I want to talk about in the song Who Knew by Eminem off the Marshall Mathers EP. Quote, you want me to fix up lyrics while our president gets his dick sucked. Fuck that. Take drugs, rape sluts, make fun of gay clubs, men who wear makeup, get aware, wake up, get a sense of humor. Now, I want to pause right there. All right, so what he's talking about is like how ridiculous is it to censor music in this particular case, to censor music when all the news is covering the sordid details of what happened to President Clinton, between President Clinton and Monica Lewinsky in the Oval Office. Because this is what he's talking about. How ridiculous is it to censor music when that's what the news is covering? All right? And he's saying, fuck that, take drugs, rape sluts, make fun of gay clubs, men who wear makeup, things you don't want necessarily people to be saying these days. Absolutely. Things you don't want people to be saying these days. But the point is that he could say it, and you should be capable of being able to say things like that. Not because that taking drugs is a good thing or raping sluts is a good thing, but rather that it's saying raping sluts or rape sluts is not the same as actually raping sluts. Okay? And so when it comes to, get aware and wake up. Get aware and wake up. And people are always saying how woke they are these days and so forth and stuff like that. And I think even 20 years ago, Mr. Mathers knew what was going on. He saw people were starting to take things way too seriously and get not allowing their sense of humor to be jaded by political correctness is basically what he's talking about. All right. So here he goes on to say in the song Who Knew? Quit trying to censor music. This is for the kids' amusement. The kids. But don't blame me when little Eric jumps off the terrace. You should have been watching him. Apparently, you ain't parents. Now that little Eric jumping off the terrace is a reference to Eric Clapton's son. Now, if you don't know the story about Eric Clapton's son, perhaps you do know Eric Clapton's song Tears in Heaven, which he made a bundle on. Okay? Tears in Heaven is a song that he wrote for his son, who walked off a balcony when he was young and died. And so, Eminem here is saying, apparently, Eric Clapton should have been watching him. Apparently, you ain't parents. Now, if there's anything that you've picked up by listening to the Marshall Mathers EP, is that he is very serious, that Eminem is very serious about being a father for his daughter. And good for him. Absolutely. Every kid needs a father as well as they need a mother. Okay? And so I do take issue with that. Is like, but, he's very serious about being a father and about talking about fatherhood. You should have been watching him, Eric Clapton. Apparently, you ain't parents, which is a very cold way of saying, is like, you ain't parents because, you let your kid die. I mean, it's quite cold, but it's very truthful. There's some wisdom in that, because if you're smoking weed or playing with your guitar or something like that, Mr. Slowhand, all you got to do, and you should have been paying attention to your kid, because what is really the most important thing? Really, what is the most important thing? And I think that Eminem has his priorities straight when he starts talking about things like this. And I think that there's a lot of kids growing up in this day and age that have been poorly raised. That's why you see all this chaos in the streets. They have been poorly raised by their parents. They've been allowed, by either television or devices to be raised. And so that's why you have situations like, granted, the little Eric jumping off the terrace was long before the devices and cell phones and stuff like that. But I mean, there are distractions in the world, even long before, cell phones and devices and stuff. So, I mean, I have to agree with the little bit of cruel wisdom that I find in a lot of Eminem's music, specifically this album that I'm talking about, the Marshall Mathers EP. I want to talk about another song called "The Way I Am." It's probably my favorite song on the album, "The Way I Am." And there's another quote I want to pull from this song that I want you to consider for a moment. There's a line that says, "'Cause they full of shit too when a dude's getting bullied and shoots up his school, and they blame it on Maryland and the heroin. Where were the parents at? And look where it's at. Middle America. Now it's a tragedy. Now it's so sad to see in upper class city." Now that's another indictment. I think he's specifically talking about the Columbine shooting. I believe that happened in 95, 94. I can't remember. It was the mid-90s when the Columbine happened, and a lot of people were blaming it on music like Marilyn Manson. And it's quite ridiculous to blame it on Marilyn Manson. And even I agreed with that, even though there was a ton of people who didn't agree with that, that thought that because an artist makes music, whether it's Marilyn Manson or Eminem or anybody makes music, does not involve culpability for the crimes committed by people who listen to that music and take the concepts within that art form and take it to a ridiculous degree. All right? That does not make them responsible for what happened. All right? It's a horrible thing when some dude gets bullied and shoots up a school. That's a horrible thing. All right? But I don't think you should be blaming somebody who's living, because you can't blame the dead anymore. That's the problem with these. That's why these suicide shooters or these suicide bombers do what they do. You can't throw a mass shooter in prison if he shoots himself. Anyway, that's just one little bit of "The Way I Am," which is my favorite song on the album. So let's go on to this next song called "The Real Slim Shady." The Real Slim Shady. There's a quote in there I want to talk about. It says, "Yeah, I probably got a couple of screws up in my head loose, but it's no worse than what's going on in your parents' bedrooms. Sometimes I want to get on TV and just let loose, but I can't. But it's cool for Tom Green to hump a dead moose. My bum is on your lips. My bum is on your lips. And if I'm lucky, you might just give it a little kiss." And that's the message we deliver to little kids, and expect them not to know what a woman's clitoris is. Of course they're going to know what intercourse is by the time they get to the 4th grade. They got the Discovery Channel, don't they? Now this is an excellent indictment. Because just like the coverage of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, they're the things that are on TV, like Tom Green's show back in the day. It was awful. It was awful. Does anyone have the DVD box set of Tom Green's show on MTV? It was awful. That dude got lucky that his 15 minutes lasted that long. But I mean, I think he has a very good point. It's like you have all this stuff in the media and television, and you want to focus in on somebody like Marilyn Manson, or you want to focus in on somebody like Eminem, like he is the cause of such social ills. And I don't think that's the case. You know, these kids are growing up too fast. They learn learn way too quickly about the sexual nature of humans, of adults, and they're getting, indoctrinated into the life way too early. And he has a very good point. And I believe even earlier in that song, he's talking about what about the makeup you allow your 12-year-old daughter to wear. He has a very good point. Like I said, it's like Eminem. He seems to have a very good, very devoted sense of fatherhood to him. And so, I mean, even I think his daughter was quite young back in the day, back when this album was released. And so, he would think about the future of his daughter when she's 12 years old. It's like, I'm not going to let her wear makeup. No, I think that's too young to be getting involved in that kind of sexualization of females. And that's a responsible father right there. And so he's concerned. He's concerned about these kids. They're growing up and they have all this information at their fingertips. They're quite unsupervised, just like the Columbine kids. We're quite unsupervised. And therefore, when they get into the teenage years, they're getting into all sorts of crazy stuff and end up in their 20s in these streets out here these days, rioting, burning stuff. There's another section of the song says, of the same song, The Real Slim Shady. I'm like a head trip to listen to, because I'm only giving you things you joke about with your friends inside your living room. The only difference is I got the balls to say it in front of y'all, and I don't got to be false or sugar-coated at all. That is an affirmation of the First Amendment. Okay? Everyone who gets pissed off at comedians who talk about raunchy things, all you people who sit there and get pissed off at Joe Rogan because he made a generalization on a podcast. Words are ethereal. They disappear. Give it a second. Every single word disappears. See, it's gone. Even if you're listening to this podcast 10 years from now, the words come and the words go. All right? And everyone has this capability to make words appear briefly and then disappear. But the things you joke about in your living room with your friends, once it starts getting put out there on the internet for everybody to judge, because that's really what we're talking about. Comedians, when you go to Joe Rogan's podcast, if you get up on Joe Rogan's podcast, you're sitting in some room with a friend. Everyone who comes and sits there across from Joe Rogan is treated like a friend. I guarantee you, I could just tell that about Joe Rogan. He'll greet you with a handshake and a smile as a welcome. And that's how we all should be. I may disagree with Joe Rogan about a lot of things, but hey, he will sit down and talk to people that even Spotify won't agree with. Like Gavin McInnes, Milo Yiannopoulos. All right? Joe Rogan will sit down and talk to them. And that's a testament to his character. And freedom is, and you can't be getting pissed off at everything somebody says. Once you get that camera that's in the Joe Rogan Experience, that camera, it gets broadcast to any living room on earth. All right? Where it can be judged privately. I'll sit there and yell at Joe Rogan's leftist views. Absolutely. But I'm not going to sit here and say he needs to be canceled because he doesn't agree with me on every single thing. And just like comedians who tell jokes that you don't like, you don't have to laugh at them. All right? But you don't have to try to cancel somebody because, hey, sometimes they're a head trip to listen to. But they're only telling jokes that people joke about with their friends in their living rooms. All right, I want to go on to this last point about Marshall Mathers and the Marshall Mathers EP. Here's another quote from the song called Marshall Mathers. Starting shit like some 26-year-old skinny Cartman. God damn it. And anti-Backstreet and Ricky Martin, whose instincts to kill NSYNC don't get me started. These brats can't sing, and Britney's garbage. What's this bitch retarded? Give me back my $16. All right, I'm going to stop right there. Because that is an indictment on pop music. And he's absolutely correct. is like every single song by Backstreet Boys and Ricky Martin and NSYNC and Britney Spears does not have an iota of wisdom that is in this line. It's all garbage. It's all earwig garbage. Pop music is it's bubble gum. It's the fruit stripe bubble gum. It's delicious for about 2 seconds, and then you got to spit it out because it just tastes like rubber. All right? And that's what pop is. And here I am, sitting here 20 years later, still listening to the Marshall Mathers EP. All right, so let's go on to the continuation of the line. This very last part I want to talk about. Quote, all I see is sissies and magazines smiling. Whatever happened to wilding out and being violent? Whatever happened to catching a good old-fashioned passionate ass whooping and getting your shoes, coat, and hat tooken? That right there is the most relevant thing I think he said on the entire album. And I'll tell you why. Because Eminem is older than me. I think he was born in 1972. I was born in 1977. He's older than me, but we both come from a similar generation. We grew up in a generation where, when you'd walk out in the streets unsupervised by your parents, because, there's nothing new under the sun. When you'd go out in the streets, it's like you have to face, the world in a different world where sometimes, you'd be running with your friends, you're riding BMX bikes, you have an argument with a friend. Next thing you know, there's a scrap. There's a fight. Sometimes you got to get into a fight. I was on baseball teams. Guys would fight. Playing Little League. Guys would fight. Just running around with friends. Guys would fight. People would fight in school. People would fight in the lunch yard. There were fights. I've been in plenty of them. Plenty of them. More than I'd like to have. All right? And that's the generation we came from. And you know what? It's made me appreciate peace all the more. It made me it made me far more likely to avoid conflict than to approach it. That's what my fighting experience has taught me. All right? And even in 2000, all they could see was sissies and magazines smiling, which is sissies and magazines smiling is kind of like the generation that we have today. The generation that's coming up today, they haven't really seen any conflict. They haven't been in a situation. They haven't been all alone on a Saturday with just their friends riding around the neighborhood, unsupervised, and getting into a fight with a friend. It's all these, what do they call those, play dates and stuff like that, where they're constantly supervised. They never have to deal with any real conflict. And the next thing you know, they're in the streets lighting fires, and when they get arrested for lighting fires, they don't know what the hell to do with themselves. Or they go out there and they run into somebody who's like an ex-military guy who actually knows how to throw a punch or something like that. And they get their ass handed to them by somebody like the Proud Boys or something, or Patriot Prayer, and they don't know what to do with themselves because that's the first physical conflict they've ever been in. Now, I'm not saying that the world I grew up in is any better than the world that is available today for kids. I'm not saying that it's good that I had to suffer through bullying. It's not that I'm not saying that it's good that I had to fight sometimes growing up. But I learned how to deal with conflict. I learned how to avoid conflict because of it. All right? And you can realize very quickly, if you catch a good old-fashioned passionate ass whooping and get your shit taken, you can learn real quickly how maybe I shouldn't walk down that street anymore. Maybe I shouldn't have shouted that kind of thing at people. Maybe I couldn't have eyeballed that guy that caused me to get that ass whooping. You learn how to avoid that kind of conflict once you face conflict when you're younger. Now, I'm not saying that the world I grew up in is better. The world that Eminem and I grew up in is better than it is today. I used to think that bullying was a bad thing and it needs to be eliminated, but somehow I think that it's a good thing. And I know this might be a controversial thing, and it even causes conflict in my own mind. But in many ways, it could be a good thing. Shaming other kids, making fun of other kids for why they're weird or something like that. It's like, you're weird, Scott. You're weird, madman. It could be a good thing. It could be a good thing to face conflict. Because sometimes you have to be able to catch an ass whooping before you think about giving one. That's how I felt. It's like when I was smaller, I didn't hit my growth spurt till my junior year of high school. I was small for a while. I was picked on for a while, bullied. But once I became a force to be reckoned with, by the time I was a senior, hitting the weights and stuff like that, being a bigger guy, it's like nobody really wanted to tangle with me anymore. And in fact, I sometimes found myself in situations where I could easily overpower other people. I could easily be the bully. And sometimes I was. And, in my private thoughts, my prayers, these are the things that that concern me about my soul, about how I treated other people when I was younger. Because sometimes you're bullied and sometimes you're the bully. All right. And both of those situations weigh heavily in your mind and stick in your memory. And they stick in your memory way better than the carefree, fun days where you have faced no conflict at all. So I want to say that, there's a lot of wisdom to be found in Marshall Mathers EP, the Marshall Mathers EP. And I think that, you should listen to it and you'll find there's some. Oh, it's the Marshall Mathers LP. I'm just being informed. Marshall Mathers LP. It's a long play record. So I think you played at 33 RPM.